Hello and welcome to this month's webinar. Today we're discussing 2021 in review. So we're going to be looking at the ever-changing cybersecurity landscape over the course of 2021, and we'll also be discussing what we think the future landscape of cybersecurity will be across 2022. So a very brief overview of CyberClan. We are a cybersecurity company, obviously. We do specialise in incident response, and over the many years that we've been operational, we've managed to successfully aid and help many of our clients through a cyber incident, whether that be a ransom attack, a business email compromise, or so on. So today we are joined by a wonderful panel of speakers, including Joviana Gonzalez, who is our incident response lead for CyberClan. We have Brian Dusek, who is the head of America's cyber at Mosaic Insurance. And then we've also got Lindsay Nicholson, who is partner and vice chair of data and cybersecurity privacy at Lewis Brisbois. So if I can get you guys to come on and introduce yourselves, that would be brilliant. Brian, if we could start with you.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you for the invitation. Happy to be here, and we've got a great panel. Present company excluded, but I had to make one joke right away. But as Louise said, I am the head of America's cyber for Mosaic Insurance. My role is to oversee, as the name implies, our cyber practice throughout the Western Hemisphere, primarily the U.S., but also in Canada and Latin and Central America. And we are a startup that came into play last year, the Lloyd's Syndicate, as well as a companion model that brings in third-party capital. So work with both of the great folks here on the panel, and can't wait to hear what they have to say.
Fantastic, thank you. Joviana. Oh. One sec, Joviana, you're on mute.
Okay, let me start all over again. Hello, everyone, and thank you, Louise. Thank you for having me today and for being part of this panel. And as you previously had mentioned, I work for CyberClan, and I am the North American DFIR lead, team lead. And I look forward to today's discussions.
Fantastic. Lindsay?
Good morning, everyone. As Louise said, I'm Lindsay Nicholson. I'm the vice chair of the data privacy and cybersecurity team at Lewis Brisbois. We are a team of over 50 lawyers who specialize in assisting our clients as they navigate through cybersecurity incidents, ransomware, business email compromise, anything else that comes along that impacts the security or integrity of an information or computer system, or the privacy or protection of sensitive data. Like Brian said, I've worked with all the folks on this panel and get us started on war stories, and maybe we'll scare you a little, but maybe we'll educate you a little and help you get ready for 2022.
Fantastic. So it's brilliant to have you guys on today. We've had Lindsay before. She is absolutely wonderful. So please do take note of what our experts have to say. They are experts. So today, during the discussion, I'll be asking a couple of questions to the panel. We'll be listening to their responses, but as well, we would love to have you guys submit your questions throughout the discussion. So if you think that there's something that we've missed or something that you'd really like us to touch on, feel free to send us your questions in the chat function down here, and we'll try and get them covered off at the end of the webinar. So my first question to you guys is, recently we brought out our Q3, Q4 ransomware report, which is available to download off our website. Slight plug there. In that report, we noticed that the healthcare industry has been victim of the most attacks throughout 2021. But, you know, primarily probably because of the wealth of data that they have available. What has really stood out for you guys throughout 2021? Joviana, it would be great to start with you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. So in 2021, I observed healthcare, construction, education, government, and technology and IT industry be the victim of the most attacks. This was a year in which healthcare organizations across the US have had to battle ransomware attacks since the pandemic began. This year also, ransomware crippled a hospital. This compromise and inability to provide the timely care directly resulted in a patient's death. Although some threat actors groups specifically mentioned they would not attack organizations like hospitals and critical infrastructures, others specifically targeted them because they believed it was the organization's duty to protect their network due to the company providing subsidies for cybersecurity. So this was perhaps the first time we observed victim shaming in these attacks. We also observed universities being targeted at higher levels than previously observed. Although institutions such as universities, they performed and they implemented multiple safeguards to protect their infrastructure, threat actors still infiltrated their networks. So across the board, for our organizations for 2021, we found more zero-day attacks, which included the Kaseya, the Hafnium Chine Chopper, GitLab, Soho Managed Engine Desktop Central, and of course the Log4 Shell. That's basically what stood out the most for 2021.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah.
Brian, from an insurance perspective, what really caught your eye through 2021 for cybersecurity?
Not much happened. So, yeah, that's true. I'll be done now. No, yeah, we're an industry in flux, and that's a good thing in a lot of ways. It's very difficult. The biggest thing for the insureds right now, more than anything, is that the pricing has changed tremendously, and you're seeing a lot of insureds, some of whom haven't necessarily had an incident, who are coming into their renewals and seeing 100% increase. Many are seeing much less than that, but there are definitely some adjustments. Some call them corrections, some call them other things that I won't say here. But it's definitely, there are a lot of adjustments to the pricing. I think that it's something where there's a lot of conventional wisdom out there as to when this is going to end, and there are a lot of thoughts that this would be an entire webinar on its own. But that's really the biggest thing that has, I think, more than anything changed, but companioned with that I think is a very close number two, is we're seeing a lot more collaboration with the brokers and the insureds and the insurers in the sharing of information and coming to the discussion a lot more prepared on all sides. So insurers are asking a lot of questions, but there are many of us who are trying to ask the right questions, not every question that necessarily could be asked, because ultimately that's really what you should be doing. I mean, I can ask a lot of questions that don't really matter. I need to know what's going to help me look at what the potential risk exposure is. And for the brokers and the insureds, we're seeing them come forward with a lot more information and fronting a lot of those questions that we would normally ask. And so as much as it's been a very 2021 was a very eventful and a very hard year for a lot of folks, I see a silver lining in the sense that I think there's a way forward that is much more collaborative and something where we can all work together and with our third-party providers as well.
That's a brilliant point, and I think that's, you know, it's definitely, you know, really excellent to see, you know, different organizations, different skill sets working together to try and you know, combat this and get people up and running as quickly as possible as well. Lindsay, from a legal perspective, what have you really noticed throughout 2021?
I think there's probably two large impacts or large observations I would reference. One is, and this isn't surprising, it's a continued trend, but the continued trend of ransomware variants to exfiltrate data from environments. When I first started working in this space many years ago, ransomware was usually presumed to be encryption only. And the risk that the threat actors had been in the environment and seen data or compromised data was a little lower down on the list of things we investigated. And that's flipped on its head. These threat actor groups in most scenarios are doing reconnaissance in environments, trying to steal data that will at least push forward and drive the extortion effort, information that they threaten to publish. And so that is, it's not truly universal, but it has now become one of the preliminary concerns we have, and drives the investigation and drives the legal analysis and compliance analysis. The other thing, which is a slightly different thing, but which has already been mentioned, is the large scale industry attacks or exploitations of vulnerabilities. So the Microsoft Exchange exploit that we saw about this time last year, the Kaseya incident, cyber as and I'm not in the insurance space, but observing it, we don't have hurricanes, we don't have major weather events, but we have these types of events, the types of events that cross all sectors, hit all industries, and have a really catastrophic effect. And so I think there was a lot of learning going on last year when we had multiple incidents. I mean, we had SonicWinds, we had Kaseya, we had Microsoft Exchange. So we had big incidents where vulnerabilities were exploited to impact a high volume of victims all at one time. So those were the two takeaways that kind of left us, trying to catch our breath a little bit. We ran a marathon last year. We really, really did.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. We did see that increase in attacks using those exploits, and it was something that hadn't really been taken advantage of previously. So no, that's excellent. So Brian, we've sort of touched on this during our discussion before this webinar, but my question to you is, will we be seeing a change in the level of cybersecurity measures a company needs to have in place to be able to get a cybersecurity insurance policy in 2022? Because, previously with my discussions with other insurers, we've known that, you kind of expect people to have at least two-factor authentication set up on their network. Are we going to be seeing an increase in cyber hygiene realistically to be able to get a policy?
Yeah, we absolutely will. And you're going to see the further back you go, and it's not necessarily pandemic related, but say a 2019 underwriting experience versus a 2022 experience, that will be much more dramatic than a 2021 versus a 2022. I think they'll still keep, I like to think of it as refining, because really this is an industry, real line of business in cyber that is still in its nascent stages in a lot of ways. I think there's a lot of maturity that has, it's been, a good 20 years of having a solid product, but it's something where we're refining, and there are a lot of new carriers who come in, and we're one. There are a lot who are refining what their product has been, but the consistent thing that you're starting to see, and this goes to my point before of how the brokers and insurers are coming forward with a lot of information that would normally be asked, not just in an application, but bringing forward in their underwriting calls and presentations. They're talking about their multi-factor authentication. They're talking about where their backups are. Are they segmented? Their segmentation generally, their backup specifically, talking about all those elements that go to what we know from working with our trusted risk providers and on this call, what the genesis of a lot of the exposure is, because that's where I think I talk about collaboration a lot, because I think that's the only thing that's going to make this a truly sustainable industry, is we are all working for the same goal, which is fewer incidents overall. Things are going to happen. That's why you have insurance. But what we're trying to do is have more resilient insureds that are much more. It's not just about, we don't want to pay money. It's not a callous capitalism moment here. It really is something that, let's get some of this low-hanging fruit out of the way, and not just low-hanging fruit, but what are the defenses that you can put in place that will help? I mean, I think of it as like ransomware. It's like if there are a burglar in my neighborhood, I mean, I care why they're doing it to some degree, but mostly I care how they're doing it. I want my doors locked. I want everything done first before I worry about necessarily what their motivation is. And that's where I think that's the kind of approach I think that we're trying to take now, and make it a reasoned approach as an industry, not just something where it's a and look at the insured itself, their culture of cybersecurity, because it's one size truly doesn't fit all, and you have to look at an insured and truly underwrite and make this meaningful.
It's kind of like maybe using an analogy of a house, isn't it? Really, like, you know, the two-factor authentication and the antivirus are sort of like the lock on the front of your door, but then also having, you know, the security system in place, the cameras and the alarm and all the other stuff, making sure that you've got all of that in place.
Yeah, and where's the safe where you keep all your jewels and things like that?
Exactly.
You know? Yeah, and all of that's part of that culture of security that I think we're really starting to look more to as an industry, which is beneficial to everyone, because it really does then take the idea of where are you right now and where are you going to be? Where are you? I mean, it sounds corny, but where are you on your cybersecurity journey? Who are you working with on that journey? That's really something that I couldn't give more advice to insurers if I wanted to. That's what insurers are looking to see in a lot of ways.
No, brilliant. Thank you so much for that. So over the course of 2021, as Lindsay alluded to.
I wanted to add something.
Oh, yes. Sorry, Joviana.
I wanted to also, I know that the previous question you asked to Brian, and of course I defer to Brian as a subject matter expert on this. But I'd like to share some conversations that I've had with colleagues, and I've seen that companies need to focus more on the basic security hygienes, which includes the layers of security, which are multi-factor authentication must be enabled, passwords must be managed, ports need to be restricted to necessary services, software updates and inventory must be managed, endpoint protection must be implemented. So I just wanted to share that those are some tips that I see that based on my conversations with colleagues that insurance companies are looking to be able to insure a company.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Joviana. So yes, as I was saying, over the course of 2021, Lindsay alluded to this as well. We've seen an increase in the number of cases that have involved some form of data exfiltration. But Joviana, I just wanted to touch on this. Obviously, you have sort of first-hand experience with the people who are affected by this sort of thing. What sort of impact have you seen on businesses that have been impacted by this? If you could give us a couple of examples.
Sure, yeah. For 2021, this was also a year in which we observed threat actors coming to develop best software and tactics. Different ransomware groups touted how fast their softwares could encrypt machines and how fast they could exfiltrate data from those machines. We saw commercial off-the-shelf software used against companies in innovative ways, such as tools combined with Metasploit. Mimikatz is a good add-on for Metasploit. And remote management software is being used to exfiltrate data, such as rClone, TeamViewer, pCloud, Google Cloud, FTP, and others. In addition to that, we saw fileless attacks involving commands executed in memory and never written to disk through the use of a tool called CobbleStrike. In addition to that, we saw managed service providers, which are also known as MSP attacks, provided another area of concern concerning MSPs may not just deal with one compromised company at that point, but potentially dozens or hundreds of companies at the same time. In every ransomware case, data exfiltration detection and confirmation of whether or not data exfiltration occurred is very important. A threat actor targets the data for exfiltration, not only to resell the data, but also to extort a company into paying the ransom or for the company to risk having their stolen data published. This is where forensic analysis is critical to analyze artifacts resulting from the threat actor's activity. Machine and log analysis is typically used to help identify who needs to be notified after the attack. Of interest, the most significant impact from criminals performing data exfiltration has been an increased interest in companies negotiating with the threat actor.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Joviana. Lindsay, I mean, you come across, you help clients all the time who have had their data stolen or being held until the ransom is paid. What sort of insights can you give around this particular topic?
You know, paying a ransom is always such a difficult decision. You know, when you wake up in the morning and you see an environment that's locked up with ransomware, I don't think it's anybody's desire to go straight to, well, how much do I need to pay this person and how do I get it done? So I think one of the things that is sometimes overlooked in this process is when you have a company that's locked up and it's operationally impacted, and we have to have that tough discussion with them about, well, you saw the ransom note and they say they took data, and very often they do. And let's talk about which threat actor group this is and how they use the data and what they might do with it. For a lot of these companies, it becomes a very emotional decision. And they have a lot of concerns about, you know, how am I protecting my people? How am I protecting my business? And that's jobs and financial security, as well as the data that's impacted. And all of this is happening in a crisis situation. You know, and fortunately or unfortunately, for those of us in our space, it's very lucrative for the threat actors. It works. The tactics that they employ prompt people to sometimes make the decision to do what they never thought they would do. One of the things that I think is a great thing about our industry and having good cyber insurance that gets you access to really good resources that have threat intelligence, have the ability to answer questions about where the threat actors went and review the artifacts and make decisions, is the understanding that this is how companies recover faster. This is how they recover better. And this is how they navigate what is just inherently a horrible situation to be in. The threat actors are going to continue to push. We're seeing a number of groups over the last year to year and a half that have increased their aggression, from making phone calls to people, threatening DDoS attacks. We've also seen a number of groups over the last year that skip the encryption altogether. And instead, it's all threats and data theft. So there's not a one size fits all. And I think it's going to continue to be a very traumatic thing for organizations. And we have to approach it with some sensitivity. We don't need to criminalize these victims. We need to support them, provide them resources, and bring all the people to the table with all the different perspectives. In my opinion, that's the most critical thing any organization can do, is make sure they've leveraged resources and have a whole team looking at it from multiple different perspectives at one time.
Oh, brilliant. Brian, did you have anything to add?
Oh, I have lots of thoughts on this, and they're all in agreement, because I think that's one of the big discussions is you know, ransomware. Certain insurers are are limiting it, using co-insurance, where the insured will have some skin in the game still. So maybe 50% of the extortion payment and any related coverage. Some are just not offering it. It's a case-by-case thing. It's hard to get a trend right now because the industry is still kind of trying to get its arms around how best to handle this. I think the thing that I will say is that I don't hear a lot about saying that the idea of we should, to Lindsay's point, of criminalizing the victim. Because it's a really hard position to take, to say, well, going back to the torture analogies, so going back to the burglary in the house, say, well, how dare you let your house be burgled? I mean, we don't say that sort of thing, or we don't. And the easiest analogy, kidnap and ransom insurance. And I'm not trying to equate human lives to data, but it's not insignificant what happens with a ransomware effect. So I think having a much more robust conversation about what protections are in place, what we expect to see in place, how we can help if we can, if it's putting in touch with the right providers that we work with, that sort of thing. That's where I think the conversation needs to go, as opposed to and then obviously having hopefully more government crackdown on these groups. Because that's really where the problem is, more than anything, is that, to Lindsay's point, it pays, so people are doing it. I can't stop that. I've been told by the U.S. government several times that I'm supposed to stop impersonating a federal agent, so I'm not going to try it again. So I think the real key for us is that we have to do the best we can to help the insureds have the tools they need, really make very clear what the coverage is, what it's intended to do, and what we expect to see in order to provide that coverage.
Yeah, it's all about having the right people at the right places.
Yeah, and being transparent, being honest with each other, have an
Yeah.
honest conversation.
Yeah, transparency. Yes, it's key. I agree.
Yeah, I think as well, one thing that some of the people on this call probably be interested in as well is, you know, the fear around it all as well. The minute your data is taken, that's it. The minute that ransom note arrives, the panic can easily set in. If you haven't got that incident response plan already in place, you haven't worked out exactly what you're going to do in such a scenario, I think, you know, it's very easy for people to go into a panic and maybe do ever so slightly the wrong thing, like possibly notify all of their customers that their data has been exfiltrated without actually finding out whether the data's actually been exfiltrated. I can see Lindsay and Brian both nodding at this.
It happens.
So, you know, it only takes a scared marketing person like myself to accidentally click send all on that email to every single customer telling them what's going on. But there is something to be said for transparency, isn't there, really? Lindsay, you had a really good example of this during our run-through call prior to the webinar. I just thought it was such an excellent example.
Yes. So when I first started doing this work and handling ransomware cases, there was a great bit of the shame factor was still there. You know, if your company was hit with ransomware, something must have been wrong, and there was a lot of control over communications. And I'm a lawyer. I love control over communications. It's a very good idea to be smart about who we tell and what language we use, and think of long-term risk impact. But I did have a client this past summer impacted by a ransomware attack that when we were having the initial discussions about response, I outlined my suggested communication plan, and they were very kind and said, well, thank you. We appreciate that you're our counsel and we like your advice, but it is our culture to be completely transparent. And we want to be upfront and we want to disclose this to all of our clients. I had a minor panic attack. I kept to myself, thought through it, and then had a discussion with them about, okay, well, let's assess the risks of doing that. Let's talk about what you want to tell them, how we want to deliver that message. But ultimately, that is the way we approached it. It was their decision. And we were openly transparent with all the clients about what had happened, the steps we had taken, the experts we had in, that we were communicating with the threat actors. We even shared that information. And kept up regular conversations. And this was at a law firm. And I can tell you that it was actually incredibly positively received. If there's anything that has come from the increase in ransomware over the last 12, 18, 24 months, it's that there is an acknowledgement that it's common. You're probably not the only organization you know that has been through it. It is not an automatic criticism of how you run your system. I mean, we all know there are zero-day exploits that are exposed and found and exploited every day. And in this situation, we even had some of the clients respond with, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We just went through that too. How can we help you? Can we share information?" And at the end of the day, it was a very positive experience. They didn't lose a single client. We were able to successfully recover them. We did a small notification based on investigation. And I learned a lot from that experience. I'm still about controlling communication. The lawyer in me is going to wear that hat till the bitter end. But I'm a bit more open to the idea that more communication educates the whole community, and can sometimes go a long way to helping clients recover, because there's a little bit of support and sympathy going through the process because it has been such a common experience, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think one thing that all four of us will agree on is that it is brilliant, you know, if you have a cybersecurity or cyber insurance policy in place, because it gives you access to so much, you know, so many different people that you wouldn't have access to. You know, you get access to a breach coach like Lindsay, you get access to a forensics expert like Joviana, and that means that you then have access to skill sets that you don't have personally within your organization, and it's a brilliant thing to be able to take advantage of those skill sets, and listen to the advice that you are given, but as Lindsay said, ultimately it's up to you what you do with it, really. Brian, you look like you want to say something.
I always look like that. I just talk all day. No, I just think it's I like that the fact that we come from different views or different jobs and perspectives. Although I am a recovering lawyer, so every time that Lindsay says I like to control communications, I'm trying not to nod furiously, like, oh God, yes, please. But I think that's exactly it, and it goes back to what Joviana said earlier. It's about having the right people in the right place, and I think that's really about that conversation I was talking about having is. Sometimes, if you're a larger insured, you may have those relationships in place already, and that's important then to talk to your insurer and say, this is who I'd like to have, so we can make sure on the claims side. I did that for a lot of years before I went to the underwriting side. And having those conversations before they have to happen, it's true of anything, but it's really true of claims. And that's really what insurance is about. It's not about the words. It's about when the claim hits the fan, what's going to happen, and knowing who you have. And if you don't have someone, and your insurer is going to help you with that, start that relationship up if you can, or see if that's an option for you, because they're going to have ideas. Lindsay is going to have ideas on things because she's seen and because the communication she was talking about with other insurers that benefit off of everyone else's frame of reference is, I guess, the way that we don't always reinvent the wheel, because one of the things I worry about is that with ransomware, we lose the forest for the trees, that ransomware is so big that we forget sometimes that there are all these other ways that you have coverage under a policy, or risks that can arise that potentially have coverage. And that's where having the people who see this a lot and can say, don't worry, this is going to be, we're going to be able to get through this, makes the experience so much easier.
Fantastic. Yeah, definitely. So one of the obvious main things that we saw throughout 2020 and going into 2021 was the pandemic meant that there were a heck of a lot more of us working from home. It became the trend of 2020, 2021 was the year and a half of remote working. But that was actually a benefit to a lot of companies. A lot of companies saw that as a positive thing. They realized that having flexibility within the workforce wasn't necessarily a bad thing, and it meant as well that they could save on costs for buildings and such as well. So with businesses seeming like they want to continue on this trend of remote working throughout 2022, what sort of advice could we give to businesses to make sure that they're secure with their employees working remotely? Joviana, this is probably one for you.
Okay. Well, we definitely know the pandemic expedited the transition, for many companies from a traditional on-site workforce to one that had forced them to be remote working. So many arrangements had to be implemented. We did see early on, companies implement the best security practices possible in order to limit the exposure for being breached. However, there was some companies that were better equipped than others to do this. We observed in small and medium-sized firms, budget had to catch up to address the security gaps due to remote work. In addition to that, we observed companies implementing new software and hardware and then having to learn to operate these security tools and software. For example, a new firewall left improperly configured still introduces a host of problems for organizations. So we go back into the right people are critical in dealing with these shifts in security requirements. And so 2022 may bring a whole host of new security issues as threat actors continues to take these operations underground to avoid detection. So one of them is that we're going to see, due to the rise of ransomware and insurance coverage considerations, executives may create internal personnel solutions to mitigate over or recover from financial loss. We'll also observe new executive positions created, including chief recovery officer, or more of an emphasis in the role of the CISO. It all boils down to having the basic security hygiene. It's very important, and you have to have the right people and the proper experience and training to fully implement these security solutions. But there is no guarantee that anything is bulletproof. But the most important thing that you could offer, an organization can offer to the organization, is having training, awareness of phishing attacks, of phishing emails, of being able to identify this, being able to monitor this attacks. So basically, again, it goes back to having the right people and the right places to be able to have a better posture for 2022.
I think that's one thing that we've seen again and again, and has been underestimated in the past, is making sure that your employees are trained up to be able to recognize things like phishing emails, since they are actually one of the top ways of entering a network. It takes a couple of seconds to just check and make sure that link that you've got in the email has come from the right person. It is not a really bad thing to be clicking on. This is the thing, is it literally takes one click and you've given access to this threat actor.
Cybersecurity should be the #1 topic on every boardroom, basically.
I think we'd all agree with that, wouldn't we?
Hear, hear.
#1 topic, for sure. And then, of course, this goes back to implementing the right people, the right expertise, making sure that you're prepared, because you're not bulletproof. No matter how many extra layers of security you add, there's so many vulnerabilities out there, and threat actors are getting more and more sophisticated. So we just have to be prepared for them. Organizations too.
We've said it again and again on webinars in the past. It's not a case of if, it's more of a case of when now when it comes to cyber attack. And just because you're a small business or a freelancer with you're the only person within your organization, you're a one-man band with a laptop, does not exclude you from being a victim of a cyber attack. At the end of the day, if you hold data and you've got and you've got access to the internet, that's it, you're a target. So yeah.
Louise, not only that, but this could also influence whether the attack is successful or how widespread it becomes. So it's very important to be able to have best practices and all this in place, so that you could be prepared, so that you could catch it on time, you could contain it, and minimize as much risk as possible.
I think with that employee training, I'm sorry, Louise.
No, you go, Brian.
So that to Joviana's point, I think the employee training is always it's a real checklist thing for a lot of us, because you want to see that, but we want it to be meaningful. You want it to be something that it's not just, oh yeah, we did it and don't worry, everyone's on this. What does your company need? Do you have mostly remote workers? Great. Now are they being trained on how to use the security? You spent all this money on this great security structure. Do they know how to use it? That's part of training as well, not just being aware of the privacy stuff and being careful on those things. It has to be a full picture. And that's where you see the insurers that are much more resilient and are able to build on that, because it's kind of like a compound interest. Like all the knowledge that you've had keeps building up, because we've been saying, a lot of these things for years, and people, I'm sure, maybe get this webinar saying, okay, but I know a lot of this stuff, but it's not only still true, it's true in a very acute sense, because we can now point to exact cases where employee training has saved things. And that's one of the things that I think we don't always hear about. We hear the war stories that are the big things that went wrong and how we're able to get through them. But like Lindsay's point of this, here is a way that it could have been far worse, and like the near misses, those to me are where we can build on a lot of successes. And to Joviana's point, I think that's where that employee training is absolutely mission critical when it comes to any company that has a huge amount of remote workers right now, not just for their own well-being, but to make their insurance discussions a lot easier.
That's the thing as well. I think it's so easy when you are a remote worker to feel cut off from the rest of the workforce. You might have Slack, you might have people that you have regular meetings with, but at the end of the day, you don't have Bob in accounts sat next to, you know, I don't know, 24-year-old John, who is a bit more au fait with cybersecurity, and then be able to, you know, give a little nudge and ask to check whether that link's okay. You don't have that necessarily, that trust or that, you know, companionship that you get in an office environment, and just be able to quickly ask the question. You know, it's on you to make sure that email is safe, and that link is safe to click. And that's why, you know, employee training is so important right now. You know, these people are basically on their own.
Yeah, well, email continues to be a common attack vector for ransomware. So making sure the organization needs to make sure that they have email security in place that can detect these phishing attacks and malicious attacks and links. And then again, it goes back to taking the time to train users in cybersecurity best practices, because we've seen the difference in an attack getting blocked because organizations had all these security layers in place, so they were able to block from having, you know, being encrypted. So, you know, from our perspective, we've seen it in both ways. And again, it goes back to training your employees and making sure you have the best practices in place and practicing them.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So we've had quite a few questions come through now, and I'd love for us to be able to address some of them, if that's okay. So Peter has asked, he said, would be interested to see how folks have found their first year of CCPA, CPRA, and what changes it has driven. Does GDPR planning cover the same areas, or are there specific gaps within GDPR aware organizations? Wow. Okay. Who wants to tackle that one?
The Lindsay one for sure.
Lindsay.
Let me say a couple of things. Well, one of the things I can say about coming out of the first year, I guess coming out of CCPA, is that we still have a lot of unanswered questions about how it's going to work and how it's going to impact organizations. Fundamentally, when I approach CCPA and GDPR compliance with a client, they are slightly different, but there are a lot of interrelationships. And so it's definitely something that can be done together. But there are some differences that if you are a California-based company or you have California-based consumers, that you'll want to specifically address. I think that we're going to continue to see some development. I mean, obviously, when you add a brand new statute and then a pandemic that shuts the courts down, you don't get a whole lot of precedential authority coming out, and you don't get a whole lot of opinions about how does the right to cure part work and how does that impact actual liability. So I think it's still in flux when it comes to integrating into company culture the idea of privacy rights. I don't think that's a bad thing, because I think we're going to continue to see other states expand those rights and embrace some of them, if not all of them. And so I think they're definitely something that, from a compliance and planning standpoint, work with a great deal of synergy. The one thing I am seeing, and it's not hugely widespread yet, but I'm seeing it enough to observe it, is the rise of some companies, businesses, that are selling to consumers the right of deletion, and they are using it as a hammer against organizations and sending out demands to companies saying, you know, my name is Joe Smith and I live in Austin, Texas, and you have to delete my information. Well, not if you live in Austin, Texas. Texas doesn't have that. But organizations are frightened by it, and they don't know how to approach threats of, well, I will sue you, or I will come after you, and how do I respond to that? And how do I balance that I may have this obligation to someone in California or someone in the EU, depending on my business operations, but I don't have it as to someone in Texas. And so I've had a number of clients that I've consulted from that perspective, that, and this is an observation I will make, and I don't think I'm alone, a lot of times consumer protection laws have really noble causes and then they end up being abused. That's what I'm already seeing that, and it's costing clients a lot of compliance money, just to answer the question of, what do I do when I get this kind of question? How do I determine whether I have an obligation or not? It's an interesting observation, and I advise clients through it to the best of my ability, but I don't think that's going to go away.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Lindsay. We've got a question for you, Brian. Hasn't underwriting changed in 2021? Questions asked or protection required to accept and insure a client besides premium increase?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, no, I absolutely. And I think, but it's been a process, and I don't think it magically happened in 2021. I think that it felt like it did in a lot of ways because the premium increase came along with an expectation of, like 6 or 7 certain things. Do you what's your threat monitoring? When do you for endpoint? How do you control your vendors? There are a list of these that all insurers ask about. Ransomware gets the headline, and there's a supplemental application that usually goes up with a lot of from a lot of the main primary providers, and that's but there's a whole host of controls that we're asked about, but we're drilling down on more as an industry because we're seeing how those losses are arising, especially with vendors and the contingent business interruption that can arise from that type of relationship, or just they're the easiest way in. I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, it was a vendor that started the whole Target thing. That was back in 2013. So I mean, we're evolving with our knowledge of the risk, our grasp of how best to prevent it, and also how to recover and restore from it. Because that part, I think that is something that does get lost sometimes in the shuffle as well. Is that I wish I knew who to give credit to on this, but the phrase "even sprinklered buildings burn," and I love that, and I remember that all the time as an insurer, because no matter what you do, that bad things can happen. And so we have to have the ability to do our best for a covered loss, to put our insureds back in the best position, make them as whole as we possibly can. And that's something that doesn't get talked about as much, but is as much a focus for us as the how do we look at our risk exposure, because we need to say, are these tools, are these the right partners we're working with, that sort of thing. So I hope that answered the question. I kind of feel like I got off a bit, but
I think you answered that very well, Brian. So Ted is asking, do you see a shift in threat actors' behaviors moving toward more stealing data to shutting down production servers to have better odds of collecting a ransom? Joviana, do you want to have a pop at that one?
That's actually an excellent question, and that's actually a trend that is likely going to occur, where threat actors will be reaching out to key employees within the organizations, offering payment to install malware or give up credentials. What will be the insider threats? And 2, there should be also these ransomware criminals will just go in and steal your data and just get out, to not even encrypt and just steal your data. That should be a trend that, for 2022 now, how it's, all these cyber criminals are becoming more and more sophisticated. So I hope I answered the question, so that yes, we should see insider threats, and 2, we should see more data exfil and just no encryption.
Brilliant.
And if I can add a couple of thoughts to that, because
yeah.
I did see more cases last year that were exfiltration without encryption. Those present some interesting challenges, because very often there isn't really clear attribution to who is behind it, unless they choose to identify themselves by some sort of fun, kitschy name that they put out on TikTok. But the reason that's an issue is, yeah. Well, but a lot of times there isn't a ransom note, and so they steal data. They don't encrypt you, and instead they're emailing you, and that's what I'm seeing with this group. And with that, there's it's difficult to attribute, and it's difficult to determine, do we get any value out of paying something? Because our threat intelligence is a lot more limited there. It is a lot easier for us collectively as a group to say, this is how Conti behaves, or this is how Ava Flocker behaves, or this is how Cuba behaves. It's different when it's kind of no-named guys that stole data and they're sending emails across the company saying, we're going to publish it, we're going to DDoS you, we're going to make your life miserable, we're going to call your clients. Making decisions about how to respond to that can be a lot more difficult. You don't know how reliable it'll be. Are you going to be held along and re-extorted? And so as a skill set from the threat actor's point of view, I think it's hit or miss. One of the things that we do know, whether we like to admit it or not, is we sometimes are more comfortable with paying because we know that this is how Conti will respond, or we know that this is how Ava Flocker will respond, or when we get from the staff to the affiliate and all those different levels. I think those cases are much, much harder for businesses to respond to, and frankly, much, much more emotional. They feel more personal when emails are coming into inboxes and they're picking apart the way the business is operating, and they're threatening to go to clients, and they're threatening to tell employees that the boss isn't protecting them. When we think about the business model of threat actor groups and the code of honor of the criminals, that loses a lot of input on the extortion only cases. They're much, much harder to predict. Yeah,
I think the level of threat that or threatening behavior that threat actors are showing has definitely increased and changed and become a lot more menacing. It's not just a ransom note that suddenly prints out across the whole of your printer network anymore, or or something like that you receive. It's now phone calls and things as well, isn't it? So it's a lot more intimidating. We've had a question through from Kelly. What are your thoughts on Insurtechs in the market? Have they helped or hindered the hard market? Furthermore, what do you think about carriers restricting coverage for ransomware? Brian.
That's for me, isn't it? All right. That's a better cocktail conversation, if I'm honest. I'm an Insurtech. I mean, well, I'm not personally, but my company is, and so and I think that's a term that I think is with those of us who know what it means, but it gets thrown around a lot. And really, it's I think every company to some degree is an Insurtech, every insurance company, because you're using digitization and automation to be able to help your processes. And there are some that use AI to help and different algorithms. And there's a whole thing. I think that there's a I think I said it before, that one size doesn't fit all, and that's absolutely true for insurers, because I think that there are certain insurers, say, and it goes to the second part of that question with those who don't offer ransomware coverage. Well, honestly, that's their prerogative. I think if they don't, if there are certain insurers who don't offer cyber at all because they find it to be completely uninsurable, I respectfully disagree. And again, can have a cocktail conversation with them about that. But I think that any smart money that is, and I say this, as an old coverage lawyer, but any smart money that has the well-being of the insured as its prime concern, welcome aboard. I'm happy to have you. I want, we can only benefit from more knowledge. Now that is not, it's kind of a non-answer, and that's on purpose because this is being recorded, but it really does depend on the company itself. I think that there's a lot of benefit to having, there are things that we can do. If you can have machine learning do certain aspects, but have the humans then still focus on the element of underwriting and that personal element, because that's what insurance is about, is relationships. And it's about trust. I mean, I say, it's about claims, but that's about trust, that we're going to be there when things go wrong. And I know it sounds like a commercial, but that's really that's insurance in a nutshell. And that, to me, again, if it's smart money that is collaborative, that means well and is in it for the long haul, and that, welcome aboard, love it. And competition, can float all boats. So I know what the question is kind of going to, and I think that was my best way of answering that diplomatically.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Brian. Fantastic. So we've had a few more questions come in. We do only have 5 minutes left. So you know, I would like to give the panel the opportunity to, you know, I'll send the questions through and we'll get those answered. But really, my final thing that I'd like to, you know, to ask you before we all sign off is, you know, what is your what would be your best advice for those, you know, watching this webinar going into 2022, you know, from you know, a restoration and an insurance and a legal perspective? What would your best piece of advice be for those people watching this webinar? Joviana, do you want to kick this off?
This one, yes, definitely. Well, business as usual, it's unacceptable. 3 takeaways. Organizations changing need to change and address the people, the process, and technology that must still occur. So for people, I already had mentioned having the right people is crucial, but there's also the consideration of having the right processes and technology. So for process, we'll see an emphasis, and I touched base on this a little bit previously, on implementing policies and procedures to mitigate insider threats. So again, threat actors are reaching out to key employees within the organization, offering payments to install malware or give up credentials. We'll also see companies will expect a quicker turnaround time for recovery and analysis. This includes post-breach analysis will have 48-hour turnaround time for most cases. As far as technology, greater acceptance and implementation of zero trust maturity model. It's being implemented within the federal government and should be expected to see greater acceptance within the private sector. 0 days will continue to surface with greater frequency. Cloud threats present not just vulnerabilities, but also misconfiguration. So there's, again, no bulletproof solution, but going back to basic security hygiene is critical and crucial to limit your exposure to just being compromised. So I could offer, you know, some tips like hire a cybersecurity team or build a group of internal people who can tackle it. Only someone who knows how hackers operate can set up the right defenses to protect your business and ransomware. Another one is establish a backup practice that is smooth and reliable so that in the event of a ransomware attack, you can simply just, you know, restore systems and carry on. Again, email is a common attack vector for ransomware, so be sure to have the email security in place that can detect phishing attacks and malicious attachments and links. Training your employees is very important as well. Take the time to train the users in cybersecurity best practice. Make sure all software is key to be updated. Audit your security measures and practice to find holes and misconfigured systems and other potential vulnerabilities, and do it regularly. So it's always best to have and set up a response plan and test it. It's, again, like you had previously said, Louise, it's not about when, but not if, when you're going to be compromised. So no business is safe from cyber attacks, but you do have to be proactive. And when it comes to digital security, nurture a culture of knowledge sharing and taking responsibility and adding all these cybersecurity layers and having the right people in the right places would be, you know, at least our recommendation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Joviana. Brian, your one takeaway.
Oh, I had 3. Sorry about that one.
No, Joviana, I've talked plenty. Believe me. Take this seriously, and be transparent, and talk to people who know more about this than you do to help you. Those are the 3 big things. If you do nothing else, you'll be in a better position, and yeah, it may cost more right now, but the more transparent you are and the more you're prepared and the more you put out what you're doing and where you are in your cybersecurity journey, the easier your discussions with your insurer will be.
Brilliant. Thank you, Brian. Lindsay.
And my quick sum up, as I know we're running out of time, is talk to your broker, get a good cyber insurance policy, and then look at the resources available in that policy and take advantage of them, whether it's preliminary testing, assessments, or just getting to know the vendors that are available under your policy. Any one of us will accept your calls. We're happy to talk to you about how we can help you before and after an incident, so you know who to call, and in the event something happens, you're more prepared. So in addition to everything that was just said, don't leave the insurance piece out of it. It gets a lot of people to the table to help you if you need it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. Thank you all for attending as well. We hope that, the discussions that we had have been informative for you guys. We know that there were a couple of questions that were left unanswered, but what I'll do is I'll email those questions over to our panelists and ask them to, hopefully write back. And we'll get the answers over to you. So yes, again, thank you for attending. Thank you for joining us, panelists. All of your answers were absolutely brilliant. As I mentioned before, we do have our Q3 ransomware report. It is up on the CyberClan website under the resources section, although I will put a link to it onto our YouTube channel and onto our website as well with the replay link. If you are watching this post-event and you do have questions, feel free to email us at communications@cyberclan.com. And as I said before, I will email the panelists any outstanding questions and we'll get those answers over to you. If 2021 has taught us anything, it's that being prepared for a cyber attack is what everyone needs to be doing, whether that's having a full incident response plan in place or even just having an antivirus set up on your computer. If you do have any questions around your cybersecurity, again, all of our panelists are there and ready to answer those questions. Lindsay, mentioned that it's worth looking at your cyber insurance policy as well and getting in contact with the people on panel there as well. These people are here to help you, not hinder you. So do take advantage of asking any questions that you might have. So yes, this is the end of our webinar. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. And we will be posting the replay link out very soon. So if you have missed it or you have colleagues that you think might benefit from hearing the discussion that we had today, please feel free to share that with everyone. Thank you very much again. Goodbye.
Thank you.